Chapter 8 Far Away. What would he be like, Utnapishtim, whom the gods had rewarded with eternal life? Would he look like Enkidu, thick-set and shaggy? Would he stand larger than life, skin radiating life like the zest from a lemon? As Gilgamesh stood, arms outstretched, catching the wind in Urshanabi's shirt, he saw the shore coming closer, and on it all manner of wonderful sights. A lion sleeping while a fawn calmly cropped grass within the circle of its paws, a wolf playing alongside a lamb. The air was full of the sound of wood pigeons crooning, and doves sat in heart-shaped pairs on leafy trees. "No snow ever falls here," said Urshanabi, the ferryman. "The animals live in perfect peace. There's no death for ravens to gloat over." On Paradise Shore, only the hours and the years died imperceptibly, molting like feathers from a swan's back. Then Gilgamesh caught sight of a middle-aged couple sitting together under a halub tree, he in a hammock cracking nuts, she busy brushing a little white goat. At the approach of the boat, the man in the hammock shielded his eyes to look. He had large, sticking-out ears, a thin neck, and protruding teeth. "There he is, man of Uruk," said the ferryman. "Not that he will tell you anything different from what I've said." Gilgamesh could hardly believe his ears. "This is Utnapishtim, the immortal, the far away?" Leaping ashore, he went and stood openly staring at the old man in the hammock. He must have looked very menacing, but the man in the hammock did not stir. He simply asked, "Who are you?" "I am Gilgamesh, king of Uruk," he declared, bracing his shoulders, jutting his chin. "My word," said the man, looking less than impressed. "The burdens of kingship must be great these days. Why so haggard and ragged, as if you had seen all the sufferings of the world?" "Because I have," said Gilgamesh. "I've crossed the desert, scorched by the sun and flayed by frost, traveled through 12 leagues of utter darkness, punted my way across the river of death, and I have grieved too. My friend Enkidu died, and I've sworn never to suffer the same fate. That's why I've come, to learn the secret of immortality from the one man who has it. I thought you would be more what?" Utnapishtim smiled, amused by Gilgamesh's bewilderment. "More full of life, raging and racketing about, wrestling wild beasts to their knees, slaying giants? Yes, 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 yes!" Without realizing it, Gilgamesh sat down on the ground, the fatigue of his journey suddenly overwhelming him. Utnapishtim's wife brought him a drink of wine. "Why, where's the hurry? What do I have to prove? When a man has only a few years of life, he feels he must pack them full. Say you were given a small trunk and told, 'You can carry away with you only as much as you can fit in here.' Then, naturally, you would cram it full, wouldn't you? Me, I have all the time in the world. Time is not standing at my back with his whip, making me dance, making me run, making me strive. I've had time to learn the important things are few: a wife, contentment, memories, peace. You should not have put yourself to the trouble of coming all this way," he said at length. "It is your fate to live and then to die, just as it was mine to live forever." "Ah, but I slew Huwawa," boasted Gilgamesh, "and the bowl of heaven. On my way here I slew a whole pride of lions." Utnapishtim nodded, less impressed than Gilgamesh would have hoped. Might I venture to suggest, he said, that the gods prefer their works of creation alive rather than dead? Tell me, said Gilgamesh tersely, tell me how you came to be immortal. And while he listened, he was thinking, at the back of his mind, what can this man do that I can't? When Enlil began creating the world, said Utnapishtim, his workmen were his fellow gods, Anu and Ea and Wei and Nergal. But long before the last riverbed was dug, the gods threw down their spades and pickaxes and refused to do another stroke. Then Wei came up with a solution. They ought to create some kind of creature to complete the work. Thus human beings were created. They were ideal. When they could not work anymore, they died, but there were still enough because they reproduced themselves at such a rate. Soon cities grew up, swarming like anthills with industrious little people. The only snag was the noise they made. All day long they quarreled and laughed, bartered goods in the markets, sang or made speeches. They left their babies out in the sunshine, and the mewling and shrieking was more than Enlil could stand. "What is that noise?" demanded Enlil. "It's the people," said Ea. "Busy little things, aren't they?" "Thin them out," hissed Enlil, nerves frayed from lack of sleep. "Send plague to prune the noisiest." Ea did as he was told, but he had grown fond of humankind, and hurried off ahead of plague to warn them. When plague arrived, the cities of earth were silent as mirages, the citizens moving about their business wordlessly, the market traders miming, the babies' mouths plugged up with honeycomb. And while they remained silent, Enlil was content to let them live. But as time passed, of course, as generations came and went, the noise built up again, nagging and squabbling and cheering. "Silence their caterwauling!" yelled Enlil out of the windows of heaven. "Send drought and famine. Perhaps when they are dead of thirst and starvation, these humans will finally be quiet." Well, Ea did as he was told, but hurried ahead to warn the people of earth. Once again the cities fell silent. Once again Enlil relented, and drought and famine withdrew. But as time passed, of course, the noise built up again. Wars and fairs, circuses and parades, building sites and forges. Enlil slammed shut the windows of heaven, but it hardly made a difference. "I will not have this din! Drown the whole pack of them!" he bawled. And this time he summoned all his brother and sister gods, and made them all consent to the destruction of mankind. And this time not a word to a soul, not a single soul agreed. Shamash bowed his head in consent. Anu grunted and put his fingers in his ears. Even Nergal, who had shaped mankind, agreed. Even Ishtar, goddess of love. Ea too gave his consent, though in his heart he was trying to think of some way to rescue the situation. There might just be time to deliver a single message. Utnapishtim broke off from his story. 7 generations ago, Shurippak was my city. I was king there. The god Ea has always been esteemed highly in Shurippak for his gentleness towards mankind, and I venture to think that he and I were on good terms. Ea wanted to warn me, but because of his vow could not speak to me directly. So he whispered into the fabric of my house, "Do you see? The reeds of which its walls were made. reed house, listen and pray. Would that your walls were torn down today, and from your reeds were built a craft, a huge pitch-covered roofed-in raft, as tall as she's long, as she's wide and square, that those who board her might be spared the doom the gods have ordained for mankind, a flood which once come will leave nothing behind. Do not sleep, keep watch, keep awake, or the thread of life will forever break. That night when the wind blew on my house, the reeds whispered Ea's words to me as I slept, and I dreamed what I had to do. Save all of nature from Enlil's damnation. I told the people of Shurippak that I had been summoned to sail down to the underworld to pay for my sins, and that's why I was building a boat. How could I tell them the truth? Workmen were easy enough to come by as well. I just offered unlimited supplies of roast meat and rough wine. In a week I had a boat. It had 7 decks in all, each one divided into 9 sections by bulkheads to keep the various animals apart. You can't put gazelles in with lions. I mean, you couldn't in those days. I made the reeds watertight with a mixture of melted pitch, oil, and asphalt. It was big, unimaginably big. It covered an acre of ground, and each side of the deck was 120 cubits long. A cube, in fact. Not a seaworthy shape. Not an easy shape to launch. We had to keep shifting the ballast about until she would float 2/3 underwater, stable enough not to turn turtle. I loaded aboard my family, my animals. I took 1 male and 1 female of every species so that afterwards, after the catastrophe, they would be able to reproduce and replenish the earth. I mean, what would the earth be without its animals and birds? In the evening the rain began. Never seen weather like it. It turned the ground to slurry in an instant. So I went aboard myself, slithering and sliding on the mud slick around the boat, climbing the scaffolding and battened down the last open hatch over my head. It was dark. Only the hissing of the rain on the reeds and tar, as if all the waterfalls of heaven were falling on our heads. But that was nothing. At dawn, the Lord of the Storm summoned up a black cloud that smothered the whole plain of Shular and Hanish. Water seemed to well up from the ground, from the abyss under the earth. The goddess of the underworld smashed all her dams and let it come fountaining up. The 7 judges of hell came roaming through the land, torches held aloft, so that the sky outside was permanently lit by an eerie flicker. Great rods of lightning wedged between heaven and earth. That storm smashed the land like a cup. The boat was soon riding floodwaters through city and plain and forest. I had to stay at my tiller every moment, or we could have been foundered against a drowning palace or snagged on the branches of some tree. I couldn't afford to sleep. I could see now why Ea had forbidden me to sleep. For a whole day the storm trampled the world. You could hear people calling out, unable to find one another for the walls of the rain. As the rain beat on them, they all began to turn back to clay, to the substance they were made from. And how can you sleep while that happens? Even the gods were afraid. They climbed up to the highest chambers of heaven, the floodwaters cornering them like cringing dogs against the walls. You could hear the goddess Ishtar howling with remorse, because she had gone along with Enlil's damnation of mankind. Aren't they my people? Didn't I help to give them life? Now look at them, floating in the ocean like so much fish spawn. She wasn't alone in grieving. All the great gods of heaven and hell put their hands over their mouths and wept at what they had done. For 6 days and nights the storm went on, and not for one moment did I close my eyes or sleep. Even when every animal and every child and every star seemed to be asleep, I stayed awake, my hand on the tiller, praying for deliverance. When the drumming of the rain finally stopped on the 7th day, I threw open a hatch and a bolt of sunlight fell in my face like a bale of yellow hay. I looked out from my ark, and what did I see? Nothing. There was nothing to see. Nothing in any direction but water, flat as any rooftop. I don't have to tell you. I sat down and wept. I lay down and cried like a child. The whole of mankind turned to clay. The whole of nature reduced to a slick of red dust under countless fathoms of water. My head was stuffed with sleep. I was reeling with weariness. I didn't know whether to believe my eyes or not, but it seemed to me that about 14 leagues away there was an island. I blinked and bleared at it. Yes, a bare mountain tip was sticking up out of the water. I won't say I steered for it. We were drifting towards it willy-nilly, and there we wedged. For 7 days we sat wedged on that mountaintop, while the flotsam of a lost world drifted by us. Dolls, dishes, gates, wheels, bottles. On the 7th day, I brought a dove up on deck and let her go. She flew away, but clearly there was nowhere for her to perch because she came back. The next day I loosed a swallow. She flew away too, but the land was still drowned because back she came. On the 3rd day I loosed a raven. She circled slowly, blackly into the sunny sky, then flew off. She didn't come back. That was when I knew it was safe to open up every hatch and free the animals from below decks. They lumbered out past me, leaving behind a litter of feathers and fur and a stench I won't even try to describe. I watched them straying further and further from the ark as the mountainside gradually emerged, steaming from under the shrinking flood waters. I was easily visible from heaven, easily picked off if Enlil was still bent on destroying the entire human race. So I stood 14 cauldrons of oil and set them up. So I took 14 cauldrons of oil and set them up on the mountainside, lit fires under them of the sweetest smelling wood I could forage. As the fumes went up from those cauldrons, the whole dome of the sky was filled with the sweetest smell imaginable. The gods were drawn to it, like flies to honey, like shark to blood. They couldn't keep away. Snuffing up the sweet smoke, they came sighing and swimming through the rain-washed air. Last of all came Ishtar, lovely Ishtar, wearing a necklace of jewels that were every color ever given a name: red, amber, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. When she saw that the flood was over, she lifted it off over her head and threw it into the sky, swearing, "I shall remember these days. By the jewels of my throat I shall never forget." She had invented the rainbow, you see. Enlil came, of course. When he saw my boat, oh, I thought he would smash it with a single thunderbolt. "What?" he yelled. "Has one of them escaped? Who warned him?" I cowered down under a corner of the ark, with my head between my knees, hands over my ears. But then I heard my friend's voice. Ea was speaking up for me, reasoning with Enlil. "Punish people when they sin by all means, but don't destroy them utterly. Where would we be without mortals to dig and tend the earth, to press the oil for our sacrifices, to build the temples for our worship. Do you think we'll take up our tools again and labor and sweat? Think again. Why create the earth at all, if it is only to stand empty like some house on a hill, its doors banging in the wind? I didn't tell the man Utnapishtim about the coming of the flood. He had the wisdom to dream it. For 7 days and 7 nights he kept awake, steering the ark safely through the waves. Should such a man die? I had crawled out of hiding to listen. When Enlil turned and saw me, it was too late to duck out of sight again, so I stood up. He ordered me and my wife to go aboard the ark. With trembling knees, we went up the gangplank again and knelt down on the uppermost deck. Up came Enlil, closer and closer, reaching out his hands. Then, just when I thought I would die of fear, he took both Saba and I by the hand and stood between us. He touched our foreheads and said, "Live forever, man of Shuruppak. Make your home on Paradise shore, beyond the river of death, and live forever as we gods do." So, students of Mrs. Nichols, here is a question for a quick reflection and quick write. How does the story of Utnapishtim and the Great Flood compare to the biblical story of Noah and the Ark?